Today we're going to compare, order and represent decimals, which is part of the Year 5 sequence of content from the Australian Curriculum Mathematics. So let's start by looking at some decimals. 0.123. This is a decimal. Why is it a decimal? It is a number that has a decimal point and it has numerals to the right of the decimal point. These are your decimals. They represent a value that is less than a whole. The numeral to the left of the decimal point represents a value greater than a whole. So in this case, we have 0 wholes, a value of 0 for the wholes, and we have a decimal value of 0.123, and that represents something less than a whole. So let's look at another decimal. Let's look at 4.55, just an example. We can locate the decimal point, which is an indication that this is a decimal. We have got the number to the left of the decimal point, which represents the value of wholes. And we have the number to the right of the decimal point, which is your decimals. And they represent a value that is less than a whole. Now, in order to compare and order decimals, we're going to look at something we're very familiar with. We're going to look at fractions. I have a circle. I divide it in half. We know that 1/2 of a whole can be written as a fraction, which is 1 out of 2, or 1/2. This may also be expressed as 1 divided by 2. We know that from previous studies. If I use my calculator, and I punch in 1 divided by 2, that gives me 0.5. So 1 divided by 2, 1 out of 2, 1/2, can be expressed as the decimal 0.5. Let's look at a circle that I divide into quarters, to 4. A quarter, we know, can be expressed as the fraction 1 out of 4, which is the same as 1 divided by 4, which, if I use my calculator again, 1 divided by 4 gives me decimal of 0.25. Now, if I do my circle again, and I divide this third circle into eighths, one of those eighths I can write as the fraction 1 out of 8, which is the same as 1 divided by 8, which, if I use my calculator, punch in 1 divided by 8, I get a decimal 0.125. 0.125. Now, let's look at these decimals. Let's compare them and order them. Which would you suppose is the biggest in terms of value? We're looking for biggest value here. You might say it could be this one because it has the number 125, which is bigger than 25 and it's bigger than 5. So therefore, you might think this one is the biggest. But it's not, because when we compare decimals, we need to remember to compare like for like. And to do that, we need to be comparing the same place value. So in this case, all these decimals have got tenths. These are your tenths in your decimals. They're the numeral closest to the decimal point. If we compare all the tenths between these three decimals, we can see which decimal carried the biggest value. And we see that it is actually this one here, because 5 tenths is bigger than 2 tenths, and it's definitely bigger than 1 tenth. We also can look back to our circles and we can see that 1/2 is bigger than a quarter and it's bigger than an eighth. So that shows you in a few different ways how we can compare and order decimals.